system. Today, we are talking to Ellie Adams of Saturn Season Astrology and Let's F with Astrology. She's here to talk to us all about the Galactic Center, which we're going to enlighten you guys about. So if you're just jumping on, let us know in the chat that you're here. Say hey, say hello. We love to hear from you. And Ellie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, we're going to talk all about the Galactic Center. Ellie's going to get into the details of it. So, just to kick it off, do you want to just start by telling people a little bit about what the Galactic Center is?
It is, I took the actual definition down, the rotational center of our galaxy, of the Milky Way galaxy. It's a supermassive black hole, big black hole, which is kind of, it's essentially what our galaxy moves around. Like it's how our galaxy moves the way that it does.
Okay. So, would it be accurate to say it's like the center of the galaxy?
Yes, and it's also kind of thought of as a hidden sun, if you will. There's some I can see where they're going with that, just because of the importance of it, but it's an importance that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. So yeah.
Well, and I agree that it doesn't get talked about because even as someone with a conjunction to it, I remember trying to research about it. And really, all you come up with is this is a spiritual placement. And it's like, but what does it mean?
Yes, and yeah, and I mean there is like, okay, so I do think it is a spiritual placement. I do think that it is possibly like a telephone line to somewhere else, if you will. I think it very well could be, but I get what you mean. Like, how do you make this tangible? How do you, you know what I mean? How do you bring it down to earth, if you will? Um, I'm still trying to figure that part out.
Right. Like how to kind of put it in a way that, if you have this connected to a point, you kind of understand maybe how it might affect your life, because that's really what I mean, I know that's what everyone on this channel wants to know, right? Is like, how do we use this to our advantage? What are the pitfalls? How do we heal? How do we work with it? And so I know you've been doing all kinds of research with people who actually have conjunctions or prominent aspects to the Galactic Center for quite some time now, right?
Yeah, it's been like a year. It's been like a year or so, and people are like, "Are you still doing it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to be done doing it. I think it's probably going to go on for a long time."
Well, and I
But
love that so much because it's such a like it's really like the spirit of astrology to study and collect data and notice themes and put those all together and then come up with a meaning.
yeah, that's what I've been trying to do, both with the research that has been collected from people that have wanted to be a part of it, which is awesome. I really didn't think there'd be such a response. So that's really been exciting and humbling that people are even interested in anything that I'm doing in the first place. And but you bring up something interesting about like what can you do with it? The energy at this black hole is so massive that if you've got conjunctions to the GC, and I am specifically talking about conjunctions here, that planet is going to be energized in a massive way. And depending on what all is going on in your chart, you could use this for the good or the bad if you want, if you wanted to, depending on how it functions within the rest of your chart. But just massive amounts of energy, massive.
Have you found that people, I'm just curious, like, do you find there are some people who have a more um, enjoyable or positive, manifestation where people maybe have it shows up in a more dysfunctional way for some and not for others?
I think it actually kind of, this is just my opinion as of now. This is subject to change and nobody can hold me to this. I'm not going to let anybody hold me to this, but I do think that it can kind of function as both.
Okay.
I think it can function as both a dysfunction and as a sort of gifting at the same time. I think they can, which makes it hard.
Do you think it generally consistently manifests as both in the same person?
I think it can. I think it's enough of a wild card to be able to do that. Now, does it always do that at the same time? Not necessarily, but I think it is a wild card enough to where the people that have prominent GC conjunctions probably see a little of the good and the bad, or the challenging and the easy.
That's good to know because I feel like so much of astrology is like you just hear these like
Uh-huh.
generalizations about planets where this is good and this is bad. But I think, is there really good and bad? And every positive thing has a negative side or vice versa. So I love that you can speak to the whole experience for people.
Yes. Yeah. And you, yeah, it is. It's very, a lot of things in astrology are very, if you have this here, it's like this. And it's like, well, maybe not, take the whole thing into account. But the GC does feel very much like a place that hmm, both things are very, very possible.
That is so fascinating. Um, so, do you want to just go now, maybe, and talk about? We can look at the chart and talk about what the Galactic Center is and where it is in the chart.
Yeah, sure.
I know that was one of the questions I got on Instagram. Was where is the Galactic Center? How do I find it? How do I work with it?
When you are pulling your chart on astro.com, you will pull Galactic Center, or it's GAL Center, comma Sag A, and it's under fixed stars. It's not a fixed star though. It is not. It moves slowly like a fixed star, but it's not a fixed star. But that's where you'll find it. And if you look, well, I don't need to put my hand there. If you look on the chart, it is it's conjunct the sun at 27.
10.
I can't even read that. 10. Sagittarius.
So we pulled the chart for when the sun conjuncts it this year. For those of you tuning in and watching, so this is the date in December when the sun will be passing that point.
Yes.
So that's for anyone who's like brand new to what it is, and we will pull this chart back up and refer to it later on in this video. Okay, so we covered, what the Galactic Center is. And we talked a little bit about, how the Galactic Center can either charge or it can sort of dysfunctionalize whatever touches it. And sometimes it can do both things. Do you want to talk any more about what that means? What does it mean to be charged? What does it look like in someone's life if their planet is charged?
Well, that depends on what the planet is. Like somebody here mentioned, what does it mean if Mercury is conjunct the galactic center? um, okay, without seeing your chart, I would think it's going to charge your mind. It's going to amplify your mind. It's going to energize your mind. At the same time, though, it could also, the GC does warp. So it could also, and I don't want to say warp your mind because that sounds entirely too negative, but it could warp perception of things, because Mercury is also perception. This could happen. So I might say, make sure that what you are perceiving is actually as it is, if that makes sense. But that's, again, without seeing the whole chart. I don't know if I'd stick with that. If I saw your chart, I might think something a little different, but that's where my mind would go first.
Okay. So it kind of amplifies the energy of that planet. So if it were like the moon, maybe their caretaking ability or their relationship with their mother could be amplified
Yes.
or distorted in some way, and so on through the different archetypes of the planets.
Yes. 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 Because one of the questions that you had sent me is, does the planet infuse the GC, or does the GC infuse the planet? And I believe it is the GC doing the infusing.
Right.
Just from what I've I mean, that could change a little bit. I could find that there's more equality there in terms of infusing, but it does seem at this time more like the GC is what infuses the planet.
this topic is so interesting. And I keep remembering something I saw you say on one of your videos where you talk like one of the questions you ask on the research is what do you imagine in your mind's eye when you think of the Galactic Center?
I was gonna ask you that. That's funny you bring that up.
And so I remember you saying people often describe it as a flash of light, and that's exactly what it was. Just like, whoa, that's exactly what I felt from it as well. And it's so, I mean, it's so hard to put into words because it's so like it really does feel to me, and this is just my feeling, I haven't studied anything, that like the Galactic Center is almost like the source, the source of everything, even beyond the sun, that is maybe perhaps where we come from, or, um, almost like a portal to the other side or to creation itself, or if God, if you believe in that term, just it is so like big. It has such a bigness to it.
It does. What what
Yeah.
what what was your I mean, it's been a while since I've what did you put that? Was that the answer that you gave?
Probably. God, what did I say? I remember saying that. I remember, yeah, it feels like light. It feels like information, and it feels almost like energy. Like a source of energy to me. It, again, really hard to describe what I feel, but it does feel like almost like a portal, but it's coming this way.
Yes. I see what you
Even though you would think with a black hole, it's sucking energy, so but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's a almost like a telephone line, like
Yes.
it's coming to us though.
Yes. And yeah. The telephone line. Another one I like that somebody mentioned a while back was an umbilical cord. I like that one too because it does kind of feel like that. It feels like that as well. When
So
when I
cool.
think of when I think of it, I think of I think of myself pushing two walls closing in on me. And I'm pushing it away, and there's like light coming either from me to the sky or leaving me or some. It's a very but there's definitely like a stress but a release when I think of it.
Wow.
Um, and this does kind of make sense in a way with because it is a place where things are destroyed, but it's also a place where things are born. Like stars are actually born here, and there's like these, and I don't know that much about this part of it yet, but they're like these weird orb things that have been found coming out of there, and people are like, "What is this?"
Wait, so this is like science has found weird orbs?
Yes, there are these weird orbs that have come out of there, and there's also these. Okay, somebody else shot me. People like shoot me emails about this stuff, like
So
science
cool.
stuff. It is, and I haven't had a chance to look into the orb thing or the this other one, but this other one is like strings, kind of like strings coming from it, and that's like spaghetti strings. And what's weird about that is that the GC actually does what's called spaghettification. It does this to anything that happens to fall into it. So it's like, are these are these spaghetti like things being shot out of it? Are they things that have fallen into it and are just being like released? Some interesting stuff going on around there.
Well, and I also remember you talking about spaghettification from your videos too, and just I don't know. It's like what even is spaghettification? It's like a distortion, right? It's
Yeah.
like isn't it
Yes.
I mean, doesn't it really like if something goes through it, doesn't it like does it physically make it different?
Yeah. It's actually will. It'll pull it this way. It'll pull it this way. It'll pull it this way, and you'll come out with something different than what you had before.
That's so cool.
So my theory is it kind of, it does this to the planets too, that happen to be conjuncted in the chart, right? And that sounds scarier than I think it actually is, but it is going to change that. It is going to make it function. They're going to function differently.
Do you feel like those planets that are conjunct the galactic center show up in the area of life that the house they're in? Like, does the house, or I mean, they're all going to be in Sagittarius, but does the house matter to you in terms of the interpretation, like you would a planet in a house?
Yeah, you mean like if you've got like a planet conjunct the GC in that house, would I read that house into it? Bring
Hmm.
that house? Oh yeah, absolutely. Because it's going to play out more in that area of life than it will in other areas of life for sure.
So someone with their GC conjunct their, let's say their Mars in their 10th, it's going to spaghettify their career, and perhaps it'll be really charged. Like maybe they'll be extra motivated, or maybe they'll have challenges to their motivation in their career or something like that.
Yes, and they might kind of oscillate between the two. Also, drive could be a big one. I, yeah, like they might go through periods where they are super super driven, like on a warpath kind of driven, and then periods where they aren't so much.
Okay.
It could kind of, depending on what all is going on in the chart, but it could easily function as both.
Okay. Super interesting. Okay. I'm going to move now to the next question we had. So we actually talked about a few things, but one of the things I was really curious about was, are there ways to remedy, or heal the potential charge that is going to be created, or distortion or spaghettification, like how can people work with this? Is there a way to work with it, in terms of like recovering or finding a way to move past the challenges?
That's a great damn question. um, I think there is. I think being aware of it is the first thing. Um, like if you have your moon conjunct the GC, say, you might know that your emotions are a little different. The way that you handle them is a little different. Um, the way you emotionally, yeah, you're going to be a little different that way. I would almost, oh, before I keep going on, another way to kind of think about the GC that might also help to remedy any challenges. The GC has an out of bounds planet flavor,
Okay.
and it also has a retrograde flavor. So I do think that being aware and internalizing is good for for planets conjunct the GC, whether they are retrograde or not. Yeah, obviously the moon isn't going to be retrograde, but you've got like Venus there and it's direct. Internalizing Venus would be a good idea versus would be a better way, I would think, to remedy any issues than externalizing, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Since that's kind of, I have noticed there is some sort of tie with, or they seem to have similar flavors.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So that
That's
would be one
interesting.
way. That would be one way I would think to remedy or to work with the energy of the GC in a way that is more beneficial, is to be very very aware of the way that planet functions in your life, um, and to really be introspective about this and know that that planet has a whole lot of power, because it does. It's being charged by something incredibly powerful, but one of the best ways to know how to use that power is to actually internalize that planet and understand it from that point of view.
So like being sorry, I don't know why. So like being able to like really understand how, if it's your moon, let's say moon is our emotions, really understanding your emotional world, really making sure you know what triggers you, what makes
Yes,
you feel intense emotions, if that's how it shows up, finding out how your emotions might be distorted, what emotional
yes,
reactions are like overreacting, where do you overreact? And then you can look to the
yes,
house to see maybe potentially like, okay, if it's the eighth house, where do you overreact in your intimate situations, right? Where are you
yes,
extra sensitive to maybe someone who you're intimate with hurting your feelings, and just being able to really know yourself in that area of life and when it comes to the energies of that planet.
Yes. Yes. I think that, yes, that is I mean, that's probably the best remedy that I can think of. And I know that for some people that's not really going to feel like a remedy at all, but it 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 would help. It does. And I know, because I've got GC conjunctions, it does help.
I'm curious, what do you want to tell everyone what your conjunctions are?
um there is Venus and Uranus, they are like within a degree. um my sun moon midpoint is also real close. It's within maybe
Mm,
3 degrees. And Saturn is close too. It's
my
like
goodness.
within 5. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. It's so interesting because, I mean, the way you're talking about the Galactic Center reminds me of almost Uranus or Chiron in a way, in the sense that they tend to charge things as well and possibly make them dysfunctional sometimes. And even when you're talking about the healing, oftentimes the healing for something like Chiron too is going to be not what people want to hear, because we can't get rid of the wound. We can't get rid of the effect that that thing has on us. We can only become stronger than it, or become
Yes.
aware of it, or get to a point perhaps where it no longer triggers us when that same energy comes back around, which it will, because that's how
Yeah.
life goes, right?
It is how, yes, that is how life goes. You're right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there is. Yeah. And I also have, full disclosure, I also have Chiron opposing it. So there is maybe I do take a slight Chiron approach to, because from my own perspective, I guess. But I do think that the remedy is the internalization and the understanding, because we're talking about, it's going on in Sagittarius. So the understanding part of it is important.
Right, right. Because Sag is like, we want to know the meaning of everything. It
Yes.
has to mean
Yes.
something, sometimes to
Yes.
our own detriment, right?
Yes. I know that one too. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question. One of the things you talked about that I just thought was so fascinating was how sometimes the GC can give people this sort of protection almost. So, do you want to tell everyone what that means?
Yeah. Okay. So when I started branching out beyond the people that gave up their information for the research, I came across this blog post, and for the life of me, I cannot remember who the hell did this blog post. If I could, I would say. But they mentioned something about whistleblowers. The only ones they had included, though, I think were Snowden, um, Chelsea Manning, and who was the other one? I want to say it might have been Karen Silkwood. And I was like, well, that's really interesting, talking about GC conjunctions. So I started looking even more, and I noticed that people that have been well known for whistleblowing do tend to have some kind of GC contact, right? Now, I also started noticing as I'm looking through these, that most of these people who didn't wind up in prison or wind up dead also had Jupiter retrograde. And I thought that was interesting, because Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, but also because the GC to me already had this retrograde flavor to it. And I'm like, huh, now that's really interesting. So I do have this theory, and it is just kind of a theory at this point. I'm not saying it's absolute, but it does seem that people that want to tell the truth, whatever that truth is to them, and whatever that might be, if they have planets conjunct the GC and they have Jupiter retrograde, they seem to have better luck doing this, um, without winding up incarcerated or winding up dead.
Do you think that the GC makes people like more likely to be whistleblowers from the start, like because of that Sagittarian theme of truth or
Yeah,
anything like that?
I think that's very, very possible. Yes. But again, because the GC does warp things, it can warp things. We have to make sure that what is true, right? And I'm not saying that people that have blown the whistle on things, I'm not saying that they're not right or not true, or anything like that. But I think it is important to make sure that what what is true is actually true.
Right. Well, and that gets into the whole kind of Sagittarian shadow, right? Of like
Yes.
the ego side of truth of like I'm almost better than you because I'm going to tell you the truth and you don't know it, and what's relatively true opposed to what is absolute, like facts, Gemini facts, and like
Yes.
everyone's truth is a little bit different, and even if you get into the really higher spiritual channeling, they all have a different true version of the history of reality, right? So it's like
Yes.
whose truth is true. Uh, and like I mean, I'm guessing some of that can also fall under the themes of like being too preachy or, wanting
Dogma.
to, yeah, and like just wanting to tell everyone else the truth, as opposed to maybe follow our own, which is another challenge of Sagittarius, right? Is like not living up to your own ideals, even.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
Totally.
I would think that yes, I'm sure that yeah. All that has to be kept in check, I think with
But
yeah.
overall, so you're saying the Galactic Center tends to, if people with the Galactic Center conjunctions, with conjunctions to the Galactic Center are become whistleblowers, they tend to be safer or somehow protected from potential consequences.
Yes. Yes. It appears that way to me anyway. There appears to be a certain Teflon. It is weird. I just noticed the trend, the correlation, and it is interesting.
Do you feel like it's only true for whistleblowers, or have you done any other research on that?
I've also looked at I have looked at some conspiracy theorists. I have so I don't think that it just has to be whistleblowers. I think they're probably the most like dramatic example of that.
Okay.
But no, I think it could carry over to other things as well. I'm sure it could. Other things that are kind of Sagittarius related. um, Quest for knowledge, uh, even traveling. It could perhaps keep somebody more protected
Okay,
for long
like
distance
while
travel.
traveling. Okay. Okay.
Maybe I haven't
Okay.
really looked as much into that, but I do think that I don't think it's just a whistleblower thing. That's just the most like dramatic example of it. Um, but yeah,
That totally makes sense, and, it's fascinating, I'm really interested, now that I know that, to see, like, and anyone out there with galactic center conjunctions can actually see, like, maybe how they've been protected from, um, any kind of potential consequences of truth, whatever that means, and that could be maybe even on a smaller scale for people where,
yeah,
maybe someone is speaking up for something they believe in their community, and it's not necessarily, unconventional either.
yeah, yeah, it could totally translate down to something of a smaller scale for sure, or more personalized scale even. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So the next question we have, and this one I don't really know as much about, is what is the galactic anti-center?
That one is something that I until okay, and I wasn't even looking at this originally. I didn't even actually know this existed. Um, but it's a real thing. It is opposite the galactic center. It's right next to a really bright star called Elnath. So it's a very bright area of the sky, but it's also a very calm area of the sky. And it's also in space. It's got a bunch of space dust around it. So it's kind of not foggy, but dusty. And with all the energy going on at the Galactic Center, all the energy going on there, And then this other area being so calm, which makes sense, polarity, they're going to have, that does make sense. I have this idea that because there's so much energy going on at the GC, eventually that energy is going to not have anywhere to go. Like it's gonna become like almost like a pressure cooker. Like it's just gonna be too much. And then what happens is it shoots over to the galactic anti-center. Now, is everybody going to feel this? Maybe a little bit, but I think the people that have conjunctions to the galactic anti-center probably feel it more. And that planet, almost the planet or like node or angle or what have you, feels the shock. It's like a shock. It's like getting lit up. And it's quite shocking because this part of the sky is so calm. So it kind of, I think of it as a lightning rod of sorts.
Okay, this is so interesting. And so I think I read in your blog a little about how sometimes when people have a planet, and correct me if this is wrong, but if they have a planet at the galactic anti-center, it acts as a receiver of the energy.
Yes, yes. But I also think of it as like a lightning rod, like it gets shocked because the energy shoots over and kind of, it attracts it. That planet attracts that energy. Now, because that area of the sky, the galactic anti-center, is so calm, right? And it's blinded and it's dusty. I do have this idea that people that have planets conjunct the galactic anti-center, it's not that they don't know those planets are there. They know those planets are there, right? It's not like unconscious. They know they're there. But I do have this idea that perhaps they don't always see them clearly either, not because of all the energy, but like with the GC, like not like that, but there are things about that planet or what have you that just aren't able to be seen as much. They're being blinded by that star. They're covered in space dust. You know what I mean? So then it gets shocked and it kind of lights that planet up, if you will. And the window of time that happens may not be particularly comfortable, but it probably makes that planet, the person is very aware of that planet when that's happening. And I feel like this could happen through like transits, progression, all kinds of things could kind of cause this to happen. But
So then, oh, I'm curious about this. Do you think that having a planet at the galactic anti-center is going to have that effect even if the person has nothing at the galactic center, or do you think they have to work together?
I don't think they have to work together. I think I do think that if you've got planets, at the GC and at the galactic anti-center, it might be stronger perhaps since you've got planetary energy at the GC. But no, I think if you just have planets at the galactic anti-center, I think that energy can still get shocked. And it actually might even feel like it comes more out of nowhere since you're already not, you know what I mean? Like the person doesn't already have something conjunct the GC, so they're not as aware of that energy. So then all of a sudden it gets shocked over there and it's like, what the hell? That's, yeah.
Okay. So with the galactic anti-center, it's more of a sudden shock that may be unexpected as opposed to the galactic center, which is like a consistent,
Energy flow.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe
That's how
not,
that's,
sorry,
yeah.
maybe not fully consistent, but more consistent.
Yes. And the person with the GC conjunctions is going to, whether they realize it or not, that planet is already charged, right? It's already energized. So they already have that. They might not know what the source is, but they know that energy, they're familiar with that energy feeling. So when the galactic anti-center planet gets shocked, well, that still may be shocking. It doesn't feel like it'd be quite as shocking as if they didn't have that planet conjunct the GC or whatever.
That totally makes sense. Because when you have a planet that is charged in any way, you don't know any different, right? Like you don't know what
Yes.
it's like to not have that charge. So it's just becomes your normal way of being.
Yes.
And unless it's obvious, you might not even know that area of life is, uh, I mean, it's just like, how it's always been.
Yeah, exactly. So I would recommend people that have conjunctions to the galactic anti-center to also really get to know that planet. Understand, again, there is an internalization. Understand how it works, how it actually manifests in your life. But it's not like a possible warping or distortion. It's like a not seeing all of it, you know? Yeah.
That totally makes sense. Okay, so one more question is what's the super galactic center?
Okay. So the Super Galactic Center is it's okay. If you want to pull this on astro.com, you're going to want to pull Messier 87 or M87. Um, at first, when I first started looking at this, I was telling people I think to pull Galactic Pole. I would still pull this too because I think it's probably important, but the actual Super GC is Messier 87. And it is essentially it is the center of the meta galaxy that we are a part of. I think our meta galaxy, I think it's called Laniakea. I think that's the name. So it's the center of that meta galaxy supercluster of galaxies.
Okay, so this is a stupid question, but is the meta galaxy, does it contain the Milky Way as one of its galaxies?
Yes, yes, we are
Okay.
part of it.
Okay. So it's like we're in the Milky Way, the galactic center is the center of it, and then if you have a bunch more other galaxies, then that super galactic center is the center of all of those.
Yes, yes,
That is so cool.
it
So
really is. It's even. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, you go.
I was gonna say it's even more far out. Like you can, well, the galactic center of our galaxy is not localized. You can think of it in terms of it being more localized, and the super GC is like way out.
Okay. So have you found in your research that that point is, does it function similarly to the galactic center, but just on a different level?
It does. Yes, and the level thing is in it. Yeah, I think it does. This one is at it's at 2 degrees Libra right now, 2 degrees something Libra. It moves slow like the GC does. So I've seen it mentioned that this one has to do with relationships. I think it probably does. I would not take that out of the equation. To me, this feels more about balance though than just strictly relationships. Um, so things conjunct the super GC would need that balance. Like they strive for it. I think
Okay.
even without realizing it, there is like a striving for it. Um, but yeah, when I think of when okay, this I hope this makes sense. Okay, so when I think of because they essentially square one another. The super GC squares the GC, the super GC squares the galactic anticenter, and then the super GC opposes what I'm calling the super the super galactic anticenter, creating what I'm calling the galactic grand cross.
Oh my God, I love it.
That's yeah.
It's the best.
um
This is the best ever.
but yeah, uh where was I? Sorry, I lost my train of
You were
thought.
telling us how planets conjunct the galactic and, or sorry, the supergalactic center, strive for balance.
Yeah, I think that the balance is a big deal, and yeah, I remember what I was going to say now, where I was going with all that. Okay, so I think like the GC's localized, right? The galactic anti-center is localized to our galaxy, and then the super GC is up here, and I do think that they are tied, right? But somehow the super GC is like above. It's above it. Now I do think that it's tethered, and I imagine this in my mind. I think it's tethered to the galactic pole. Which is why I would pull both. I mean, they're going to be really close to one another anyway, the super GC and the galactic pole. But I would pull it because I do think that the super GC feeling like it's tethered to the galactic pole. Yeah, I do think there's something there with that. It somehow helps to, and along with the, the connection to the GC, it helps to make it more localized, if you will.
So, are you saying that people with planets, I mean, do you think the Galactic Center affects people with planets at the supergalactic center, or do you think they're both two sort of different, like two different axes?
I think, well, I think one is, how do I want to put this? Hope this makes sense. Again, the information, because how do I want to put this? Like the information, because it is more local, because the GC is like more localized, or it feels more localized to us. It feels like the information or downloads or whatever we might get from the GC is more local to this galaxy, whereas the stuff coming from the super GC is coming from beyond this.
Ooh, that is
Or or
so cool.
or the whatever's coming from there is coming from beyond this and is not just localized to our galaxy. Now that's not to say that the stuff that comes from the Galactic Center is not far out. I think it is. But this stuff is really far out.
That makes me curious too if I mean, you probably don't have an answer for this, but maybe. I mean, I wonder if people with super galactic center conjunctions are more like the kind of people you're going to see having like alien abductions or like talking about other star systems and, being really, really interested in like other dimensions. Whereas maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of imagining that
That
Galactic Center people might not be quite as might maybe like maybe more than here, but not that far away.
I can see where you're going with that, and I think that there is a, yeah, I could see that being possible. I don't have an actual answer, but I could see that being possible.
It's just so fun to talk about all this. Is there anything else about like that you've noticed as far as themes in your research? This question isn't on our list, but I just wonder that might surprise people, like UFOs or like anything else that's just you've noticed consistently or are sometimes that is just interesting and different.
Um, well, there is a this is going to sound stupid. There's a question I have about blood type and this,
Ooh.
but that was not on the questionnaire, and not everybody knows that anyway. But I do have some questions about that, and there have been some people. I had this question before, but then there were some people that mentioned it'd be really interesting if you could figure out what blood types. Is there like a blood type that tends to have this stuff more than others?
Okay. Okay.
Because there are a
That
lot of theories about Rh negative people, and perhaps, are you know what I'm talking about?
is it reptilian blood? Is that what they say?
Well, that's one theory, and then there, other theories of Rh people. They're just not really sure, I guess, where Rh negative comes from, where it, like, alien, being
Right.
like alien blood. So that I would be very personally interested to know that. But again, I feel kind of creepy being like, "What's your blood type?" So it's kind of like that might be a weird question to ask. So
That's funny. That I mean, it's fascinating because there's definitely something to this. There's definitely something to, at least to me, like these placements really meaning something. Like
yes,
beyond just I feel like beyond humanity, I guess, beyond the mundane. And I think there may be people without conjunctions who are still connected to those energies because you can be connected to what's more about life either way, but there is just something about it that's just a little bit more than
yes,
reality.
yes. And I was going to mention, since you brought up people that don't have conjunctions, um, even if, like, you don't have conjunctions, where the GC falls in your chart, you might find that area of life might, by house, it might, there might be something. I wouldn't think it would be as amplified as if you had a planet, or something there. But there might be like there might be something a little different about that area of life. There,
Okay. So do you think it would still have that charged thing, but just on a lesser level?
yeah, I think the charge. I think yeah, I think that charge probably exists regardless. Probably, I haven't done a whole lot of research on just on not having anything conjunct it, but I would think it probably does. The person may not be as tapped into it though, if that makes sense. But I do think that this is something that you could look at in the chart of anybody. I think you could, because you might find that area of
Interesting.
life. Maybe if you had like it I don't know, in the second house, let's say, it might kind of, you might have some, your values, they might be amplified or they might be kind of distorted. Same thing with money, with your personal money. Go however you want with the second house, but you might find those themes uh, coming into play.
Totally makes sense. So I think we're at our last question now, which we're going to pull up the chart for again. Which the question that was brought in, what is how does
Ah,
the
we have a negative blood. I'm negative too.
oh okay.
Cool. Okay.
Roxanne is O negative. I don't know what mine is.
Y'all don't have to be shouting out. I mean, if you want to, you can, but you don't have. Don't feel like you have to. I feel like a creeper being like, "What you blood type?"
Everyone's like,
But
I'm an alien. Okay, so we're gonna go to our last question, which is how does the GC impact our energies as a collective? This is one that was submitted, and we're gonna show the chart for this.
okay. Okay.
Okay,
So this was for December 19th, right?
let me double check here. Yep, of this year.
Okay. Now, okay. So I did take a look at this. Um, the thing that stands out most to me as far as aspects go for this is the square it makes to Jupiter.
Okay.
Um, Now, how this actually impacts each person will depend on their own. But it does feel like there could be some tension with identity and with beliefs and even with truth. um, that definitely feels like that could come into play here. But since the sun is at the GC, I feel like it could be even more wild. Um, and also, I look at where Pluto is, and we'll be in our the Pluto will be exactly this Pluto will be exactly conjunct the US's natal Pluto, like on the 27th of that month. So I think about this, and then I think about that happening like a week from then, and it kind of, I don't know. I think we all just need to make sure that what we believe is what we believe and how we see ourselves maybe line up.
Okay. So that could be like, are we acting in accordance with our own belief systems?
Yes.
That kind of thing?
Yeah, I could. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Yeah, for sure.
And
With,
it,
go ahead.
yeah, it just feels like because of the square to the ruler of Sagittarius, right? We just need to keep all of that in check collectively at this time. And depending on what this actually looks like up against your own chart will kind of give you a better way of how to do that personally. But there definitely feels like there could be some tension with that.
Well, and I guess I want to also say, like, when it comes to even just having Neptune in Pisces, I feel is part of the reason why we are in a culture now where like people can't even talk about what they believe anymore without it being some huge projection, right? Because Pisces is a sign of like one of the signs, and so is Sagittarius, that can tend to project things, right? They can
Yeah.
tend to believe things that aren't fully true based on one little thing and blow it up in their mind to be a little bit bigger than it really is. And so we have this
Yes.
happening collectively, right, with Neptune in Pisces,
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter being the ancient ruler of Pisces as well. Um, I mean, is that kind of what you're referring to when you're talking about the tension between our own identity and beliefs? Is like which political system do we believe in, or what, what beliefs
I think
about the things in the world are we adhering to?
yes, and I think that yes, yeah, and yeah, without getting too politi- political here
Right.
because nobody really wants to hear all that. Um, I do wonder if I do wonder if perhaps some things change in that regard, not necessarily in leadership or anything like that, but in like how we maybe believe in leadership. That seems possible too. How we identify leadership.
Right. Well, and I mean, even just Pluto and Capricorn being like, in
Yes.
some ways, transforming the existing structure, the existing corporations, the existing power structures, which we're seeing fall, basically.
Yes,
We're
we are.
seeing that. We're seeing those old systems based on abuse being exposed because Pluto exposes right through it transforms through destruction and exposing things.
Yeah.
So who knows? Just to kind of riff on that, possibly more becomes revealed in some way up until then that
It
perhaps like you're saying, like perhaps changes some certain beliefs that certain people had at one point.
yes, I think that's very, very, very likely. But here it seems right here specifically because of that tension, it does feel like collectively there will still be kind of like a death rattle of not wanting to.
Mm,
And I mentioned that also because Jupiter is at 29. It's just about to cross over, right? So it does there is a sense of like a death rattle too, of dying off and going into the well, not really dying off, but you know what I mean, moving into the
right,
next
of like
sign.
holding on for dear life to something that isn't working, but it's your truth. So
Yes.
it's like when you're proven wrong in the argument, but you still just gonna keep on arguing because you've been arguing it for so long.
Yes. Yes, that is yes. Yes. That's yeah. I could and again that won't be for everybody, right? But collectively it does kind of feel that way. How much it impacts you personally does depend on your chart, you know.
Right, right. And like for people who want to see what that is going to be, you could always, pull this chart on top of your own natal chart and see what
Mhm.
houses this is playing out. What house is the sun? What house is Sagittarius, and what house is Pisces? And that's going to be the area where you're personally possibly experiencing that tension.
Yes. Exactly.
Totally.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I feel like that might be a good place to stop for today. Thank you so much for coming, for sharing with us your knowledge and everything you know. And do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah. You can find me at saturnseason.com. I have a blog there where you can I also have a Galactic Center research part of this of my website where I have all the blog posts that I've done that might go into even more detail than what I did here. They probably do because I can get real detailed when I write. Um, but check that out. If you're interested in a reading, I do those too through my website. You can also find me at the YouTube channel Let's F with Astrology, and you'll be able to find me and the Saffron Sage talking next week on my channel. It won't be live, but will be I'll be posting it there, which will be fun. And you can also find me on the subreddit Let's Fuck with Astrology. So.
Sweet. And you're also on Instagram, right? At
Oh
Saturn
yeah, that's
season.
right. Duh, yeah. Yeah. Saturn
So
season astrology.
And you guys, a lot of those are in the links in the description. So, like, seriously, go follow her on YouTube, subscribe to her channel, binge watch all her videos on the Galactic Center, like I have for some of them, because there's so much information and it's so cool and it's so interesting. So, we're gonna go ahead and end there. But you guys also make a comment on this video as well if you have any questions that we didn't answer. We would love to hear more from you. And that's all we have for today. And we'll see you guys later. Thanks again, Ellie.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.